The prairie night was still as a held breath. Above the ranch house, the sky stretched black and endless, stars scattered like spilled grain. The wind had died, leaving only the creak of old wood and the faint rattle of a loose shutter. Elias McGraw sat slouched in his porch chair, broad shoulders pressed into the worn slats, hat tilted low. He looked every bit the weary rancher dozing after a long day. But his eyes beneath the brim were sharp. He let them drift shut only when he heard the floorboards groan and a soft step cross the threshold. He'd left the test plane as day. His leather coin pouch rested heavy on the table beside him, the glint of brass peeking from its mouth. His shotgun leaned close, easy for any hand to claim. For years he had lived guarded. Too many ranch hands had skimmed off his herd, too many neighbors turned their smiles to envy. And women, well, women had smiled only at his land and his gold. Tonight he meant to learn what sort of soul he had brought under his roof. Clara Hayes, the poor widow the town never tired of whispering about. Her steps paused at the doorway. Elias slowed his breathing, playing the part of sleep. He pictured her reaching for the coins, slipping them into her apron, proving the gossips right. His jaw tightened, waiting, but instead came the soft rustle of wool. Clara moved close. She bent low, her shadow spilling across him in lantern light. A blanket, his own, folded neat from the line, slid over his shoulders. Her hands, work-worn yet gentle, tucked it firm against his chest. "You don't fool me, Elias McGraw," she whispered, voice barely a thread. "You act stone, but I see the weight you carry. Thank you for giving me a place." Her fingers lingered a moment on the fabric, then pulled away. She turned, steps as quiet as her words, fading back into the house. Elias's eyes opened wide. For the first time in years, he froze, not from mistrust, but from something rarer. She hadn't touched the coin pouch. She hadn't so much as glanced at the shotgun. She'd only thought of his comfort. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses. Elias sat still, blanket heavy on his chest, heart heavier with a question he hadn't expected to ask. Who was this widow the world called grasping? Who, when no one was watching, gave only kindness? He leaned forward, hands gripping the arms of the chair, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. Out on the ridge, a lone coyote cried. Elias did not move. The test had begun. But the answer had already shaken him. Elias rattled, stares into the dark, the blanket warm against him. The man who trusted no one now wonders, what secret truth does this woman carry? Clara Hayes had not always carried silence in her eyes. Once she had laughed on a small farm at the edge of the valley, hand in hand with her husband, both young and stubborn enough to believe love could outlast drought and hunger. But raiders had come one night, driving off cattle, striking down her husband when he tried to defend what was theirs. In a single dusk-lit hour, she became a widow, her fields empty, her hearth cold. The town pitied her, but pity soured fast. Whispers grew. Some called her cursed. Others claimed she would cling to any man who could keep her. Suitors came, one offering only to sell her land, another with greedy eyes fixed on her body, not her heart. She refused them all, though each refusal carved her thinner. It was Elias McGraw who offered her work. Not charity, not courtship, just work. The richest rancher in the valley needed help in his kitchen, he said. She took it, though the townsfolk smirked, muttering she wouldn't last. Life at the ranch moved steady, measured. Clara kept her head down, her hands busy, scrubbing, cooking, stitching. Elias watched from the edges, tall, silent, carrying himself like a man carved out of stone and solitude. He gave no praise, no complaint, only curt nods. She answered with quiet dignity. One afternoon, she found him straining wire along the north fence. The barbs caught his palm, tearing skin. He didn't flinch, only cursed low, blood dripping on the dust. Clara came without asking. She knelt, dipped a cloth in water, and took his hand. Her touch was careful, restrained, yet firm enough to press the bleeding still. He tried to pull away. She held steady. "Leave it," he muttered. "You'll lose the hand if I do," she said softly. For a moment, the silence between them deepened, filled with the rasp of wind through grass and the smell of iron blood. Then he stilled, letting her clean and bind the wound. Her needle threaded through torn leather gloves that evening, mending what had split. She mended a shirt the next day, then a bridle strap after that. Each stitch neat, patient, exact. As if by repairing these small things, she stitched herself whole again. Elias watched from the shadows of the barn door. He said nothing, but his gaze lingered. The widow's pride was not in what she had lost. It was in what she could still repair. That night, as Clara's lantern burned late and her hands moved in steady rhythm, Elias lay awake, wondering, was she only sewing leather and cloth, or was she binding something deeper between them, stitch by stitch? The morning sun beat down hard when Clara tied her bonnet strings and set out for town. The path wound dusty between cottonwoods, each step stirring whispers of her own she could not silence. Though weeks had passed at Elias McGraw's ranch, she still felt the weight of eyes upon her whenever she crossed the valley. The general store door groaned as she entered. Conversation dipped, then swelled again in a tide of murmurs. Widow Hayes found herself a golden perch, one woman said loud enough to carry. "The rancher won't keep her long," another answered, lips curled. Clara's jaw set, though her cheeks burned. She gathered flour, beans, coffee, necessities, nothing more, and laid them on the counter. The shopkeeper, Mr. Creel, eyed her with a smirk. He rang the total, took her coins, then slid fewer back than he owed. "Short again, Miss Hayes," he said, mocking courtesy. She looked down at the change, then up into his smug face. Her voice was calm, almost quiet, but iron ran beneath it. "You've mistaken yourself, Mr. Creel. My money's worth the same as any rancher's. You'll give me what's due." His smirk faltered. The store grew hushed. Murmurs turned to sharp listening. Behind her, boots struck the floorboards. Elias stood in the doorway, broad hat low, eyes fixed on the scene. He did not speak. He only watched. Creel swallowed, muttered, and slid the proper coins across. Clara gathered her goods, her spine straight as a fence post. Without another word, she walked past the whispers, her dignity intact. Later, on the road home, Elias reined his horse alongside her. "Why didn't you let me speak?" he asked. Her gaze stayed on the horizon. "If I can't stand for myself," she said, voice steady, "I'll never stand beside anyone else." The words struck harder than any bullet. Elias's mouth closed. For the first time, respect stirred in him deeper than suspicion. But the echo of town voices clung between them like smoke. As they rode on, Elias's eyes narrowed toward the valley below, where gossip spread like wildfire. He knew then, the greatest threat to them might not be rustlers or raiders, but the sharp tongues of their own town. The fire burned low that night. A red eye in the hearth, crackling soft against the hush of the wide house. Outside, coyotes yipped on the ridge, but inside the ranch walls, only the pop of pine kindling broke the silence. Clara sat with her mending basket, head bent, needle flashing through worn fabric. Elias lingered nearby, boots heavy on the floorboards. He seemed restless, like a man carrying weight he had no words for. At last, Clara looked up. He wasn't watching her. His gaze was fixed on something small in his hands. A silver locket tarnished at the edges, chain broken. His thumb brushed over it again and again, as though the act might summon something lost. "You've never spoken of family," she said gently. Elias's jaw tightened. For a long time she thought he might stay silent. Then, in a voice low as gravel, he answered, "There was a woman once. Before the ranch grew large. I thought her true. Thought she loved the man, not the land." His eyes hardened. "She left with a banker out east. Promises of silk and coin. Since then, I've trusted no one's intent, least of all when they look my way." The firelight flickered across his face, deepening the hollows of loss. Clara set aside her basket, fingers folding still in her lap. She reached slowly into her apron and drew out something worn smooth with years. A pocket knife, small, initials carved into the handle. She opened the blade, dull with age. "My husband carried this," she said softly. "He fixed fence, carved wood, even sliced bread with it when we had nothing else. It broke my heart when he was buried without it, but I kept it, dull and heavy, like the ache he left. The two tokens sat between them now, his locket, her knife. Twin relics of trust betrayed and love lost." Elias's gaze lifted, meeting hers. For the first time, it wasn't suspicion that filled his eyes, but recognition. Two broken souls, not rancher and widow, but simply man and woman, scarred by the past and still standing. He reached, almost without thought, to return her knife. Their hands touched. Neither pulled away. The warmth lingered longer than either intended, silence stretching thick as smoke. The fire hissed as a log split, but neither moved, their joined hands saying what words could not. When at last Clara withdrew, her fingers trembling, Elias remained staring into the embers, locket heavy in his palm. For the first time, he wondered if trust, long buried, might yet be mended, stitch by stitch, hand to hand. The fire had dimmed to a soft glow, shadows curling along the walls of the main room. Elias McGraw sat forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on Clara. Words had gathered in his chest, tight and sharp, ready to spill, words that carried the weight of days and nights spent studying her, learning her, longing without admission. Clara, he began, voice hoarse with restraint. Before he could continue, a knock echoed at the door, sharp and deliberate. Clara startled, her hands tightening on the pocket-knife she had laid aside. Elias rose, the momentum of his confession stilled, eyes narrowing as he strode to the door. Barrett Sloane stood on the porch, hat tipped low but smile wide, polished and insincere. A neighborly greeting, he said, though every line of him screamed challenge. "Evening, Elias. Mind if I step in?" Clara stiffened. She knew Sloane by reputation, ruthless, charming, a man who measured people by what they could take, not who they were. Yet he bowed politely, eyes sliding to her, lingering too long. "I hear your widow friend is settling in nicely," Sloane said, tone smooth as creek water. "Such a shame for a fine woman to be trapped in dust and toil. Surely she deserves more than this." His gaze flicked to Elias, then back to Clara. Wealth, comfort, companionship befitting her station. Clara straightened, chin high. "I am content," she said. Her voice did not tremble. "I need no other comfort than honesty and work I can stand behind." Sloane's smile hardened, veiled threat in its curve. "Consider what I offer, while you can." He tipped his hat, turning to leave. "Some of us know how fleeting fortune can be. Don't let the ranch fall with stubborn pride." Elias remained silent, fury and caution battling in his chest. His jaw clenched. He had suspected, perhaps, that Clara's past included suitors like Sloane, but hearing the words, seeing the ease with which he tried to sway her, gnawed at him. Doubt whispered in his mind. Had she ever wavered? Was this attraction old, buried, or dangerous? Clara watched him, noticing the tight set of his shoulders, the flicker in his eyes. For the first time, she saw distance where warmth had been growing. The unspoken words, the near confession, they hung between them like a fragile lantern, flickering against the wind of suspicion. That night, Elias did not speak. He paced, bootsteps hollow on the floorboards. Clara sat near the hearth, hands folded, feeling the sting of his withdrawal. She had proven her loyalty, her dignity. But could he see it beyond the shadow of Sloane's insinuation? As the night deepened, wind rattling the shutters, Clara's resolve hardened. Somewhere outside, Sloane rode away. But the threat lingered, between her and Elias, and in the whispering hearts of the valley. Doubt had been sown. Would trust survive the intrusion? Or would suspicion undo the fragile bond that had begun to form? The valley woke to whispers again. Rumors had spread like wildfire overnight. Barrett Sloane's poison, subtle and persistent, seeping into the ears of ranch hands and townsfolk alike. "She's after his coin," some muttered, eyes flicking to Clara as she tended the morning chores. Others shrugged, unsettled by what they couldn't know, unsure if loyalty or greed drove her steady hands. Elias felt the weight immediately. His men avoided her gaze, conversations dying when she approached. Even the cook hesitated, serving meals with careful neutrality. Sloane's game was clear: isolate her, sow doubt, and watch the trust between rancher and widow crumble. Then came the blow he had not anticipated: cattle gone, tracks disturbed, gates torn. Drifters at work, hired by Sloane to weaken the ranch's backbone. Elias strode the corrals, hands clenched, jaw set, anger and strategy colliding. Every lost beast was a test. Every rustled pen a message. Clara, ever observant, had followed the ridge earlier and found faint signs missed by seasoned hands. Broken twigs along a seldom-used trail. Hoofprints angled in a way that betrayed intent. She called Elias over, pointing and tracing the path in the dust. "They've taken the herd south," she said, voice firm. "See here? And here, tracks that tell me who. We can follow, but it's narrow time. Elias's brows rose, a silent acknowledgement of surprise. He had doubted the townspeople's whispers about her motives, but now her insight was undeniable. Without hesitation, he gathered men, trusting her directions. They rode hard, dust curling around hooves, wind sharp in their faces. Hours later, they cornered the drifters near a dry creek bed. Clara stayed back at first, rifle slung, observing. Then, when the drifters reached for their guns, she stepped forward, voice carrying over the canyon. "You'll take no more from this ranch." Her eyes burned steady, unwavering. The drifters faltered, surprised by her courage. And in that pause, Elias's men moved in, reclaiming the cattle without a single shot fired. Elias's horse drew alongside hers, eyes wide with unspoken admiration. "I trust you," he said quietly, letting the words fall into the dusk. For the first time, he admitted it aloud, a fracture in his usual stone. Clara's gaze softened, almost faltering. Yet beneath the warmth, a shadow lingered. Sloane had not stopped, he would not. Every victory carried the echo of a threat yet to come. Back at the ranch, they tended the cattle, their movements synchronized. Elias watched her, noting the confidence, the care, the steady hands that could mend fences, wounds, and now, even fractured trust. He could not speak, but in the tilt of his head and the quiet proximity, Clara read affirmation. The valley air shifted with tension. Sloane's name became a low murmur among the men, a warning rather than idle gossip. Every step Clara took through the ranch was measured, alert, yet dignified. Elias knew the world outside their property could not be ignored, but here she had proved herself, not as a fragile widow needing protection, but as a partner capable of standing alongside him. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the western ridge, casting golden shadow across the ranch, Elias lingered at the porch rail, watching Clara walk among the herds. His voice, low and sure, carried only to her. "I trust you." She looked up, eyes soft yet alert, and in that glance, both acknowledged the truth. Sloane's threat would come again, but together, they might just be unbroken. The first light of dawn cut across the valley in sharp, pale streaks. Mist hovered over the pastures, curling around fence posts and low brush like ghostly fingers. The ranch lay quiet, peaceful to any unknowing eye. But Elias McGraw sensed it first, a tension in the air, the faint scent of smoke curling over the ridge. Something was coming. From the edge of the tree line, Sloane's men emerged. Drifters, mercenaries, all armed and cruel-eyed, moving with the precision of predators. Their intent was clear: burn the ranch, drive Elias and Clara from everything he had built, and send a message that wealth and land could be seized by force. Elias reacted instantly, barking orders, rallying his men. The morning calm shattered with the first volley of gunfire. Bullets splintered the fence, kicked up clouds of dust, and sent a flock of startled crows into the sky. Shouts rang across the yard, metal clanging against wood, and horses neighed in terror. Elias charged, shotgun swinging, face grim with determination. But the drifters outnumbered him, flanking his men, pushing closer to the house. He felt the weight of imminent defeat pressing on him, a suffocating certainty that the ranch could fall before breakfast. Then he heard the distinct sound of a rifle cocking. Clara emerged from behind the barn, her movements deliberate, precise. In her hands, the old pocket rifle of her late husband, worn but well cared for. Her eyes were steady, unflinching. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, with deliberate aim, she fired. One of Sloane's men went down. Another faltered, unsure which shadow was the threat. Panic rippled through the attackers. Elias caught her gaze, a flicker of astonishment and pride lighting his eyes. Side by side, they fought. Clara moved with calm efficiency, her hands guiding shots, her instincts sharp from years of necessity. She pushed forward, not hiding behind him, but holding her own in the chaos. The drifters began to retreat, confusion spreading as casualties mounted. Sloane himself advanced, boots pounding against the soft dirt, eyes blazing with fury. He confronted Elias directly, fists flying, muscles straining, teeth gritted. Elias parried and swung, but Sloane's brute strength threatened to overwhelm him. Each punch reverberated with tension. Each step drew them closer to disaster. Clara, seeing Elias falter under the relentless assault, acted without hesitation. She sprinted forward, drawing her husband's knife from its worn sheath. In one fluid motion, she struck Sloane across the side, swift, precise. He gasped, staggering back, surprise and pain etched across his face. For the first time, the villain saw vulnerability. Sloane's men wavered. Elias seized the moment, driving him backward with a final shove, sending the would-be conqueror stumbling toward the tree line. The drifters, seeing their leader bested and humiliated, turned tail, running for cover, leaving the ranch intact but scarred. Smoke and dust hung in the dawn light, evidence of chaos that had passed. But victory was theirs. Elias lowered his shotgun, breathing ragged, eyes scanning the yard and house. Clara stood near the barn, her rifle at the ready, chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Blood, sweat, and dirt marked her face, yet she remained composed, unbowed. For a long moment, neither spoke. The crows returned, flitting over the scorched fence line, the sound of hoofbeats fading. Elias approached her, hand extended, voice low but filled with awe. "I didn't know you had it in you," he said, words heavy with both gratitude and astonishment. Clara shook her head, lowering the rifle. "I didn't have a choice. You weren't going to win without me." He nodded, understanding now the depth of her courage, the strength of her resolve. The ranch, battered but standing, bore the marks of the struggle. Every scorched fence post, every dented barrel, every churned hoofprint spoke of risk, fear, and perseverance. Yet amidst the destruction, trust and partnership had solidified, born not of convenience, but of shared fire and fear. Elias and Clara walked among the aftermath, surveying what remained. Ranch hands murmured respect, glances lingering on her with newfound admiration. She had proven herself not merely a survivor, but an equal, capable of protecting the man she had come to care for, and the land that now meant as much to her as it did to him. As dawn broke fully over the ridge, Elias and Clara stood together atop the porch steps. Sloane was gone, humiliated, defeated, but both knew this was only the beginning. Eyes locked, the silence spoke louder than words. The valley had been tested, and they had survived. But would the calm ever return, or was this victory only the first in a long storm? The morning air was thick with smoke and dust, curling around the scorched fence posts and scattered hay bales. Birds circled warily above, cautious in the wake of the chaos that had erupted at dawn. The valley, once silent, now hummed with the murmurs of men assessing losses, hauling wounded cattle back into pens and tending to grazed and bruised ranch hands. Elias McGraw walked among the damage, boots scuffing dirt, eyes sharp yet softening as he noted each repaired fence and leaning post. Clara followed, basket in hand, gathering tools and scraps, moving with calm efficiency that belied the adrenaline still pulsing through her veins. Every step she took, every motion, carried the quiet courage she had displayed during the ambush. They paused near the barn, where a torn flag, a symbol of the ranch's pride and endurance, lay crumpled on the ground. Clara bent down, smoothing it over her knees. Needle and thread danced through the worn fabric, stitching torn lines back together. It was more than repair. It was ritual, a meditation, a reclamation of order from the chaos. Elias watched, silent, heart stirring as he observed the meticulous care in her hands. "Clara," he said finally, voice low, rich with meaning, "you've stitched more than fences here." "You've stitched me whole." She looked up, eyes wide, cheeks warming to a soft, rosy glow. Her voice, trembling yet steady, replied, "Then let me keep mending, if you'll let me stay." For a long moment, silence settled over them, deeper than any conversation could have conveyed. Their bond, once cautious, tentative, now revealed itself in shared glances, subtle movements, and the brush of hands over a common task. It was fragile, yes, yet real, woven stronger with each stitch, each word, each acknowledgement of mutual respect and trust. Around them, the ranch hands paused, watching quietly. The subtle shift in dynamics did not go unnoticed. The widow who had once been the subject of whispers and gossip was no longer merely a helper in the kitchen. She was a presence to be reckoned with, brave and unwavering. Elias's approval was evident, visible in the protective yet tender line of his shoulders, the quiet pride in his eyes. Clara finished with the flag, holding it up to the breeze. Its torn edges now secured, it snapped gently, resilient against the morning wind. Elias approached, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. For a fleeting second, the chaos of the last days faded, replaced by a sense of peace earned only through courage, trust, and shared survival. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the ranch, illuminating the small victories amidst the ruins. Fence posts straightened, cattle regrouped, tools stacked neatly in their proper places. The air smelled faintly of smoke, sweat, and damp earth, a reminder that survival had been hard-won, yet they endured. Clara's gaze met Elias's once more. Words were unnecessary. The simple act of standing together, tending to their shared land, said all that remained to be said. Love had grown here, quietly, steadfastly, amidst ash and dust. And the town, now observing their composure and strength, would slowly learn to respect what they had built. Not just a ranch, but a life together. As the wind lifted the newly mended flag over the porch, Elias and Clara stood side by side, hands brushing lightly, eyes locked. In that soft, unspoken moment, one truth lingered in the morning air. The world might test them again, but together they could endure and heal. Stitch by careful stitch, the valley was golden in late afternoon, sunlight spilling across the fields like melted honey. The ranch thrummed with life, cattle lowing, chickens clucking, and the distant laughter of children echoing across the yard. Months had passed since the ambush, since Sloane's threat had loomed over them like a storm cloud. Time had healed the wounds of battle, and the land, once battered, now thrived again under steady hands and careful care. Clara moved among the rows of vegetables, fingers brushing over tomato plants, beans climbing their stakes. Her face bore the soft glow of satisfaction, hands darkened by soil, but steady and confident. The garden was more than produce. It was a symbol of renewal, patience, and the quiet resilience she had carried from the first night she arrived at the ranch. Elias worked nearby, hammer in hand, repairing the porch rail where their story had first begun. Each nail driven home echoed through the warm afternoon, a rhythm of restoration. He paused occasionally, wiping sweat from his brow, eyes flicking toward Clara as she knelt in the sunlight. There was no tension in his gaze now, only admiration, respect, and a quiet love that had taken root deeper than words could reach. Eventually, he lowered himself into the familiar chair, tipping his hat over his eyes, feigning sleep as he often did in the evenings. Clara approached, a basket of herbs in her hand, and paused beside him. This time she did not drape a blanket over his shoulders. Instead, she leaned down and kissed his forehead, soft and certain. "You'll never have to test me again," she whispered, voice carrying the warmth of trust earned and love realized. Elias opened his eyes slowly, meeting hers with a smile that was calm, sure, and full of light. The brief shadow of suspicion that had once haunted him was gone, replaced by confidence in the woman who had proven herself every day. On the table beside him lay two small relics of their pasts: the old pocket knife, polished from its years of service, and Elias's tarnished locket. Placed together, they told a story of survival, courage, and the forging of something new from broken pieces. Two lives once scarred by loss and distrust, now intertwined into a shared future. The camera lingers, capturing golden light spilling across the porch, the laughter of the children in the background, and the subtle, unspoken bond that radiated between Elias and Clara. The valley seemed to hold its breath, honoring the peace carved from struggle, the love stitched from resilience, and the hope that stretched beyond the horizon. The world beyond the ranch remained uncertain. But here in this golden hour, trust had built a home. Hearts had mended. Hands had guided, protected, and nurtured. And in the soft glow of late afternoon, love had found its place at last.